Going.
Presenting Benny Goodman and his music.
All right, there we go. All right, there we go. I'm gonna charge the thing I was gonna charge. I did this. Morning, Chris. Hey, Martin. I'm still really getting ready. Hey, Timothy and Karen. Hey, Joyce. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Chuck. Morning all around. Hey, Jolene. You know, I'm going to set up the away message here, too, as last week we had some new people who couldn't figure it out. And one of them was really mad.
And first of all, one of Irving Berlin's greatest hits, Blue Skies.
Hey, Alexandra and Amy. Hey, Nancy, Barbara, Georgia, Bridget. Hey, Octavio. Kind of let you be a C2E2. Hey, Susan. We drove in and out of C2E2 a lot yesterday. Kept meeting up with people there. We didn't actually go to it. I remember some old people from the book days. Hey, Kathleen. Hey, Denise. Morning, Ann. Carol. Everything's going by so fast. Hey, Don. Hey, Londa. This is a Coyote on Patreon. I don't think they have wolves in the cemetery. Not that I honestly know the difference. Hey, Heather. Hey, Dina. Lindsay. Michelle. Hey, Cher. Adam, that's probably smart. A lot of the same people are going to be one or the other. Thanks, Tim. The Graceland book is officially out on Tuesday, but it's out in the world. Hey, Diane. Hey, Lisa. Oh, thank you, sorry. So yes, the wolves do, and that will show up here. Hey, Vanya. I took an old friend and her kid to some ghost tour stops last night, and the wolves came up. Adam, me too. It's doing all right for the two Graceland book launch tours are both sold out, so that's good. I added another one for a couple of weeks later. We'll see how that goes. Hey, Mom. Hey, Diane. Let me go turn off the air conditioning. That is, of course, a move I am liable to regret. Hey, John. Hey, Sarah. Hey, Lisa. Morning, Gene on Twitch. Hey, Dad and Doris. Glad to have you back, Doris. Morning, Kelly. And hey, Karen. It feels like it would be very humid out there. I just went out long enough to get some bagels. Hey, everybody all around. It just kind of occurred to me that I may not have the Graceland book up in this deck. I haven't done this one in a long time. And I love this particular tour, but it's never a big seller, so I don't do it too much.
Benny Goodman presents Helen Ward singing With All My Heart.
Well, Star Wars Night at Wrigley sounds fun. Tomorrow morning, I'm hoping to get Mural Monday out on time, but we're doing the redo of the thing for WGN at the cemetery at 9. Hey, Bobby, good to hear that. Hey, Lamanda. Hey, Carol, good morning. Now, rain is coming, but it looks like it'll about be done by the time we do the walking tour this evening. So, let's hope. Hey, Gina. And that the rain this afternoon will cool things down. Morning, Cindy in Detroit. Yeah, this is Coyote hangs out at Graceland Cemetery. There are quite a few of them. And I post pictures of them every week on the Patreon. Hey, Gene and Larry. And wherefore you're all ever careful with all my heart. Hey, Christine. Telling of the miracles. There's a cool historical story coming up on the Patreon next week that I've been working on for a couple of weeks lately. It's really kind of a near turning point in American history that's measured like a couple of paragraphs since it happened. Hey, David. Morning, Gail. In the past couple of weeks, I've had a couple of good research days. I've kept up just tossing things out there and finding good stories that'll make for good things for the Patreon the next couple of weeks. And you can join for the Coyote pictures plus stories every week is only $3 a month. Morning, Mona. I haven't decided what tour to do the 21st, the weekend of the 21st yet.
Benny Goodman goes way back and gets a lot of rhythm out of Walk, Jenny Walk. Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
Octavio, I heard Reva was just like walked into the room and everybody was just kind of awed by her presence. That's what Claudia Gray was just kind of in awe. Hey, Rebecca. Hey, David. Hey, Daryl. Glad to have you back. We'll give Benny another song or so. Good morning, Keely. Hey, Kathy and Vicky. Morning, Susan and Katie. Hi to John if he's out there. And Ronnie and I just had book stuff all day long yesterday. Sitting at 57th Street watching people buy Devil in the White City. Thanks, Chris. Hey, Bob. Hey, Laura. Hey, Adam Michael. Thanks for coming back. A lot of returning people today, it seems like. Glad to have you all back. Hey, Jan. It's interesting, these things where I don't post the Sunday tour till like morning of seems to be getting me better numbers than posting it a week in advance. So, Hey, Kathy. No, you haven't missed the pre-show. We're still here. Well, here the Coyote is watching over Horace White, who was hauled in front of Congress for running guns to John Brown during the Nebraska thing, not when he was doing his rebellion thing. Hey, Mona. Hey, Kristen. Alrighty, that could be. Hey, Melanie. We're going to give Benny one more tune to play while we allow people to filter in. Yeah, Susan, all the press about the Hulu Devil in the White City tours ought to help a little, anyway. Maybe I should have, if I'd known ABC was going to re-air something with me from 5 years ago, I would have listed the tour for it. I got an open space in a couple of weeks. I haven't figured out what to do with yet. Hey, Roberta. Hey, Laura. Morning, Linda. Well, that was an especially nice foggy day. Anytime it's a nice foggy day, that's my instinct. Head out to the cemetery, get the camera. Sometimes they just pose for you, and I got a picture a week to post, so I need to do at least 52 good ones a year. Hey, Jane. On really good days, I can almost get that in a day. Nah, maybe not. But hey, Eileen. Morning, Karen. We'll give Benny another minute to finish up this tune, then we will get started properly. I almost did a pub crawl this morning. I don't know who wants to go to a pub crawl on Saturday. I do want to post one pretty soon. Our Endless Summer one hasn't been aired yet this year. Mitch, best way to contact me is to email me, adam@mysteriouschicago.com. If you do it through an app or something, that's a lot harder for me to keep track of. And if you need to move from one tour to the other, I can do that. Morning, Dwayne. Timothy, I've done the Strictly Women at Graceland walking tour once or twice. And I've done it virtually many more times. It's a lot easier virtually as everybody's really spread out. Morning, Aviva. Hey, Paula. Alright, here's Benny finishing on up. This means it's time for me to get started up.
Music by Benny Goodman is being presented from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago.
From the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago, that's the Benny, and that means it is time for me to get started, so welcome along, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now. I've got about a dozen Chicago history books out, including H.H. Holmes' The True History of the White City Devil, the very rare Ghosts of Chicago, the not quite so rare, but also no bigger a seller, Mysterious Chicago, and now brand new Graceland Cemetery, Chicago's Stories, Symbols, and Secrets, officially out on Tuesday. I'm fine. I don't freak out completely every time I have a book coming out. No psychological breakdowns on my part. No. Also, I'm on the History Channel and the Travel Channel all the time, so I am incredibly famous, even if I do disappear from the screen every now and then. You should definitely pay attention to whatever I say. So this is one of the kinds of tours that I can only do virtually because it's spread out in cemeteries all over Chicagoland, and even I got a couple things from other states just kind of on a while we're at it sort of basis. It's a tour that I've really enjoyed doing. It never gets me very good numbers. I think this is actually about as good as we get right here. But it's a fun one for me to do, so these Sunday surprise ones that I've been doing lately, it's a good way to do it. Of course, next week, the morning tour is going to be the hybrid of the Graceland Release Party Tour, which is sold out, plus a bunch of Patreons. It's going to be one of my more crowded ones, but I think people understand that. So we're going to start with just kind of covering the fact that Chicago isn't really the place you would go to look for spooky graves. Back in the 18th century, you saw a lot more graves like this with the winged skull heads, the death heads they're called, here with a bit of bird poop making it look as though the thing is crying. You would also see in the old days a lot of really morbid epitaphs like "My glasses run, my grave you see, prepare in time to follow me." By the time people were being buried with headstones in Chicago, those things were kind of out of fashion. So to open up today, we'll just show some of my favorites from around elsewhere. Like at Trinity Church, there's this particularly spooky doll's head, death's head thing. Sacred to the memory of Adam Allen, comedian, departed this life, so-and-so. It's an interesting epitaph on this guy. Not only do you have a spooky grave for a comedian, a face that is probably supposed to be his, Based on what we know about this guy's work as a comedian, he played a lot of roles like Friar Lawrence and a lot of the kinds of roles like Chris Farley would later play, those kinds of roles, broad physical comedy stuff, but also a lot of Shakespeare, just because that was the what you made money on at the time. Erected by his friends as a testimony of their unfeigned regard, he possessed many good qualities, but as he was a man, he had the frailties common to man's nature. It's such a such a backward sort of compliment on the gravestone there, but such just a spooky one to begin with. Here's one. I used to be terrified of cemeteries till somebody told me there was this one in my college town that had a water slide in it. No phobia was going to stop me from seeing a cemetery with a water slide. So there it is. I later moved to go to college in a school called a town called Milledgeville, down in central Georgia, which has all kinds of spooky stuff, like this fence with all of these skulls all over it that I think has now been restored. There's this statue that I guess is supposed to be Mary, but it looks like George Washington in drag. I'll just let you stare at that there and let that one marinate for a second. This is the fish tomb out at Memory Hill Cemetery. There was always an old rumor that inside of this was a rocking chair, because after Mr. Fish's family died of cholera or whatever disease it was that year, he locked himself in there with a rocking chair and took his own life. For years, that was a thing. When they finally opened it up a few years ago to restore it, they did not find a rocking chair and were deeply disappointed by this, though other people say, well, there used to be, but some fraternities stole it years and years ago. What they did find inside of it, though, was a Fisk metallic burial case. These really ornate metal caskets with a viewing window over the face. They still have kind of a cult following. And this was one of the cases where the body inside was not in very good shape, but maybe not completely skeletonized, so it was in pretty nasty shape. Let's see what else we've got here. This is one up at Sleepy Hollow Cemetery in upstate New York. You can't really read this one, but it says, though the mother is dead and the child left behind, let it truly be said that the father proved kind. You can just kind of imagine everybody glaring at the father as they put that in place. It's like, right. So one up outside of Cleveland. The rising morning can't assure, they ran out of room and had to keep going, that we shall see the day, for death stands ready at the door to take our lives away. These are the kind of things you just didn't really see as much in Chicago. And here's the one, my glasses run, my grave you see, prepare in time to follow me. But what we do have in Chicago is if we lack really spooky epitaphs, we do have some really creative monuments and graves. Like out at Mount Carmel Cemetery in Hillside. Well, Mount Carmel, of course, is best known for the Al Capone family plot. But elsewhere in the cemetery is this really cool one of the DeSalvo family, who is not really that well known. Most likely this statue would have been taken from a family portrait, but I feel like I rarely see a family portrait quite this involved, of everybody gathering around the table like that. But what's especially cool about this, one thing, it's got, nice spooky faces. It is Chicago winters, doesn't do really well for this kind of stone. And then we've got the pictures of them down here. So we can kind of match. They're kind of a match. I don't really see which one is the dude with the mustache there. But what's especially cool about this one is it rotates. And it's built to do this. It's an articulated headstone.
Wow.
That's
Takes
Hector.
a lot
He was
more effort just
one of my
to
old
move it than
partners in
just
crime in the
walking around it
podcast
would.
and the ghost tour bus driving.
Wonder when the last time someone was it actually spun it around.
That probably happens from time to time.
Well, that one moves around. The portraits on this, you can see there's a book called Wisconsin Death Trip that you can get that's all photographs of people who were taken after they died. So at the time, it was just kind of a thing. You might not have gotten around to taking a picture of someone at the time of their death, so people would just prop them back up. So you'd see advertisements like this, photographs, better get those photo taken while you have the opportunity. Death waits for no man. Secure the shadow ere the substance fades. Get the children's portraits now. Don't delay, and we will please you. Van Horn Studio. Now, one particular instance of this, you do occasionally see, usually the pictures that they fire onto gravestones are of the people when they were still alive, but now and then there's a very famous case here at Mount Carmel, known as the Italian Bride. Now, we just found her husband's grave on Find a Grave Friday, a guy named Matthew Petta, but this is Julia Bacola Petta. She and her mother, Philomena, came to Chicago back in 1913, joining her brothers who were already there. We'll back up, and here's a picture of it that is fired onto it, of her in the casket. And what's odd about this one, what makes it even more spooky, and subject of many urban legends, is down below, the carving says that this was taken 6 years after her death. Now, a lot of urban legends, of course, have grown up around this. The most common is that after Julia died on her wedding night or in childbirth, depending on who's telling the story, her mother started having nightmares that the daughter was demanding to be dug back up. And after years and years of going back and forth with the archdiocese, she got permission to do it and found that the body was perfectly preserved. So to celebrate, they took a picture, fired it onto the casket. And at the time, people always say, oh, but embalming was unheard of back in 1920 when this happened. No, embalming was perfectly standard by then. I would argue that she is not perfectly preserved. I mean, you take a look at the arm there. Now, I was able to get in touch with the family some. They were able to send me some new materials and clear up some of the stuff. This is Philomena, her mother, who had the body disinterred with little baby Flora, who didn't die all that long ago, and shared a bedroom with Philomena when she was about 5. Philomena came over from the old country. Her first act as a United States resident might have been to go to Hull House and demand to see the devil baby. She arrived just the same month that whole scare was going on. She came here to join her sons, Giuseppe and Enrique, who are living here already, but were now calling themselves Joseph and Henry. So she was one of those cases you hear about a lot, especially with things like the devil baby story, of old women who came over from the old country, found that their grandchildren didn't speak the same language that they did. Their son Giuseppe was now their son Joseph. Really, like, everything that was familiar to them was really being cast aside. A lot of these people were just kind of shut up in the attic and considered an embarrassment by the family. In particular, the family thought of Philomena as a holy terror, in fact. She really objected to Julia's wedding, wouldn't let her see a doctor while she was pregnant. And we do know from the death certificate she died almost exactly 9 months after the wedding of complications due to pregnancy. And their house, the house where she's living, is actually still standing over in the Ukrainian village. So is the funeral home where her body was prepared. But by all accounts, she did start having nightmares that her daughter was demanding to be dug up. It really didn't take a lot of trouble with the archdiocese. She just got her brothers to pay for it. And then after finding the body in such good condition, making them pay something like $10,000 to have this monument made, which they were personally still bitter about. Philomena kind of guilted them into it. They became popular designers of women's clothing in Hollywood. Philomena eventually joined them there before being brought back here for burial. Her husband Matthew Petta went on to remarry, started a tavern over in what is now the Viagra Triangle district. Died a few decades later. He's buried out at All Saints Cemetery now. We found his grave for Find a Grave Friday. But let's move on while we're in the suburbs. There was this one is one that people ask me about quite a lot. Back in 1918, there was a terrible train wreck out in Indiana. And this was a circus train. A circus train was smashed by an empty train smashing into it. And you can see there were sickening scenes as artists burned to death. At the time, they thought there were about 46 people who were dead. It would eventually go on to be something like 86. Though the numbers vary a little bit, partly because it was very difficult to tell exactly how many people were on the train to begin with, because a lot of these were just itinerant circus performers. Sometimes they didn't really know what their names were or anything like that, or where they had come from, or who they could contact. And the train was absolutely wrecked. Among the people who were killed were Jenny Ward Todd of the Flying Wards, pictured here, and the great Dierks brothers, who were strongmen. Remarkably, there are a couple of clips. Here they are holding up elephants with their legs. But eventually there were 86 or so. So There is now a section called Showman's Rest for the Showman's League of America, set up just a little ways east of Mount Carmel Cemetery. A lot of them are just unknown men, unknown women, but there are gravestones, saying things like Baldy, one of the clowns, or the four-horse driver. It's sometimes said that there are elephants buried here as well, though generally that doesn't seem to actually be the case. Let's take a look over the area. There's a big picture of the burial. You can see that it's all human caskets, no elephants. And mostly unknown. Now, there were rumors for years that you could hear the sound of the circus animals passing by in the night. Though as early as the 1970s, Richard Crowe was pointing out, this is just downwind of the Brookfield Zoo. So that's probably what you're hearing if you hear an elephant. And again, elephants are not actually buried here. You might want to avert your eyes. There is a picture of the burial that I'll show just briefly. You can see, notably, there aren't any elephants there. Moving on, I don't like to linger on that one too much. It's just too sad. But way down to the southeast side, off of Archer Avenue, is probably the oldest official cemetery in the Chicagoland area. By some accounts, it gets a little shaky. But this is St. James of the Sag, near Sag Bridge. And this one goes back to the 1830s or so. But they don't have very good records about the place. There's been stories about it being haunted for a really long time. Back in 1873, there was another awful train wreck in which 43 people were killed or wounded. I think that number went up over time. It was a train wreck right nearby. The bodies were laid out right about where the cemetery is now. Then in the 1890s, there was a strange thing where people got it into their heads that St. James of the Sag was a free cemetery, where anybody could be buried without any cost. This was never officially the position of the cemetery or the church, but people did it all the time. If somebody just drank himself to death at a tavern, they would just haul them over to St. James of the Sag. This leads to the fact that we don't have very good records. There's a burial registry, but it's probably only about a third of the people who were actually buried there, if that many. But there have been urban legends about it for a long time. Right about a week after that article was published, a couple of musicians were staying in an inn nearby and said that they saw a ghost that looked like this. A carriage drawn by two white horses, stopped by a woman with glowing hands. And of course, we're right near Archer Avenue. It's been home of our vanishing hitchhiker and ghostly woman stories for a very long time. It's also known, like a lot of the diagonal streets in Chicago, it's an old Indian trail. 1897, around that same time, there was a story that made it news as far away as New York that they had dug up some skeletons over here. And one of them, it notes, was over 7 feet high. This is like an ongoing trope. Anytime you find 19th century articles about them digging up a batch of skeletons, they always say that one of them was a giant. Happens all the time. But this was published just about a week before that story about the ghostly woman. The cemetery where anybody can bury a body for free, which was never really the case. But there were a lot of stories. People say that you can see the ground starting to breathe as you walk around this place. There's one story from the 70s that a police officer saw a bunch of monks running up the hill and really just kind of floating up the hill, passing right through the gravestones as though there weren't even there. I know people who swear they've seen the police report about it. I haven't seen it myself. We'll move over the hill to one of those 1890s articles. All talked a bit about the McMahon headstone. About 20 years before, in 1880, Mr. John McMahon had been in bed with his wife, Mary, and all of a sudden, a burglar broke in and shot him to death. That's the official story anyway. Nobody really had any evidence that there had actually been a burglar there, and it's really kind of uncommon for a burglar to actually break into somebody's house and shoot you. So a number of people thought that maybe it was just Mary the whole time, especially by 1897 when that article came out, when it was noted that Mary had been married twice since, and both of those husbands were dead as well. Now, at the time that they published that about her, she still had more than 40 years of life left. Nobody really asked her about this. I imagine she was horrified to have that even brought up. But who knows? There's a number of individual stones around here. Now, of course, while we're talking about Archer Avenue, we can't possibly go without talking about some of the other cemeteries around Archer, notably the famous Resurrection, home of Resurrection Mary, our vanishing hitchhiker. And we have vanishing hitchhikers all over the country, but Mary's got a lot more first-hand accounts. One of those ghosts where people will see her by the side of the road and offer her a ride home. She doesn't usually say much until they start driving past Archer Avenue, and when they pass the cemetery, she just disappears. Exactly who it's the ghost of is very much in dispute. Most of the time, we've tried to look for people who died at a dance hall, because that ties it into the vanishing hitchhiker urban legend. A lot is focused on a girl named Mary Bergovie, who died in 1933 in a car wreck after going out dancing. And her spot is unmarked in the cemetery, but we know where it is. It's over here next to her parents. But there are also those who say that it wasn't even somebody buried at Resurrection at all. The whole thing is, people have been getting the whole thing wrong. It is actually the ghost of a girl buried at St. Casimir Cemetery, which is a little further off. We'll just kind of proceed down at St. Casimir here until the deer show up. A lot of cemeteries, we see deer, we see coyotes, hawks, geese. I feel like the number of geese is inversely proportional to the number of coyotes. But while we're out in the outskirts here, perhaps no cemetery has more urban legends attached to it, maybe not anywhere, but certainly not in Chicago, as Bachelor's Grove, out in the middle of the Rubio Woods Forest Preserve. We'll move ahead a little bit here, but this is an old, more or less abandoned cemetery. There's only been one burial there in about the last 60 years. But in terms of number of graves to number of visitors, it's about the most visited cemetery in the city. But it's out in the middle of the woods. It used to be a little bit more accessible than it is now. Now you have to climb over some chain and walk down a quarter mile or so of woods just to get to this place. And I'll zip ahead a little. The woods are just trees, the trees are just woods. I have no fear, nor no one should. Now here's the thing about Bachelor's Grove. It's been cleaned up a lot in recent years, but as early as at least the 1950s, it was a very popular place for teenagers to sneak in and get wasted. As far back as the 50s, you can find articles about teenagers being caught trying to dig up the bodies. I've met a few people who kind of sheepishly admit to having been involved in that, but they have different reactions. One guy says, yeah, I got caught, I had to go into the army, I don't want to talk about it. Another's like, oh yeah, we used to take our girlfriends out here to scare them with shovels all the time. And one guy told me they dug the same guy up over and over again because of a rumor that there was either $50,000 or $100,000 in cash in the casket. And they kept digging him up, even though last time they dug him up, there hadn't been any cash in there. It's like, oh, we already looked, there's no $50,000. It's not 50, man, it's 100. Oh, we weren't looking for $100,000. Let's go dig again. As you can see, there's about 200 burials in the place, but only a couple of dozen headstones. But it is the site of a number of famous ghost photos, especially this particular gravestone right here. Now, there was a picture taken by a woman named Judy Huff back in the 1990s, Judy Huff Feltz. You can see over on the left there, this is a scan of her own personal copy of it. On the left, this picture taken with an infrared camera showed pretty clearly a woman sitting there. And she will absolutely insist that there was nobody sitting on that gravestone when she took the picture. Now, the trick with it is that it was an infrared camera. She had the devil's own time trying to get anybody to develop it. And furthermore, never really used it again. So we don't really know if this is like a camera that was prone to pick up images of heat signatures of people who had been there before or what. What we end up with is a very spooky gravestone. So also a lot of urban legends about the one known as Infant Daughter. Over at the Fulton family plot. Now, the ghost of the woman on the gravestone is sometimes said to be the ghost of a woman named Luella Fulton Rogers. Now, even back before the pictures, there were stories of Mrs. Rogers haunting the place. The Infant Daughter grave has a lot of stories about how if you drop a coin on top of it, it'll never land on top. Weird gravity things like that. that never seem to work when you try them. But this is the Fulton family plot. I was on a tour about 15 years ago. It's the back side of it. And this is the family in question. On the right in the back is Luella, who was buried here, a fairly late burial here. She was buried here after being hit by a car in 1944, which time she was living out in Tinley Park and near 169th in Harlem. Not too far away from Bachelor's Grove, really. It's really quite a photo, isn't it? But even some of the more famous cemeteries, the more populated ones, the more modern ones, still have some spooky stuff. Like this one doesn't even have anybody buried in it. This is out at Forest Home Cemetery. There's this one that was built at a massive cost. It's currently they've got it on sale for, I think you could buy it yourself for about $200,000, which is a bargain for a mausoleum this size. With these lions who are just giving you the stink eye. But this was built for the Lehman family initially. There's no actual name on it or anything, just the date, 1902, when it was built. The Lehman family had operated a department store called The Fair. It was kind of the discount version of Marshall Field's at the time. Well, you can actually look right inside of the back of this one and see that there's nobody in it. They'd even rigged it up with lighting and everything when it was first built, so it could be lit up at night, I suppose. I'll move in a little. You can see there's some superstructure on the inside that's not in great shape. It would need some repairs if you were to buy this thing. But still, it's a fixer-upper. And really much, much, much smaller mausoleums than this go for 4 or 5 times that much money these days. But the reason they're not in there is they, I guess, decided they wanted something a little less spooky. So they ended up buying themselves a large mausoleum at Graceland Cemetery instead. So they ended up being interred here and just kind of left the other one, wrote it off as a loss, I suppose. Well, here at Graceland Cemetery, there's only a couple of really good ghost stories at Graceland Cemetery, and most of them are not generally widely believed, even in the ghost communities. But perhaps the most famous is the tomb of Ludwig Wolf, which is occasionally said to kind of resemble a toilet in mausoleum form. Now, Mr. Wolf was a toilet manufacturer. This is one of Wolf's standard water closets. Very fancy. But inside of it with him also is his daughter Harriet, who was killed in the Iroquois Theater fire in 1903. Now, over at the Nederlander Theater, where the Iroquois used to be, one of the ghosts that the staff used to tell me about is a little girl who would flush toilets and then giggle. Now, first guess was, hey, 1903, maybe it's a girl who had never seen a flushed toilet before. Or maybe it's Harriet Wolf, who grew up being raised by a man in the toilet industry. But there are stories that if you knock on this, like you'll hear a growl from a green-eyed ghoul that guards it, or like a wolf-like creature. Fairly obviously a pun on the name. But when I decided to film myself knocking on it just to show I'm not afraid, but then I heard something inside. You'll see me jump back in the footage here. I'll turn this way. See me jump backwards there. And, most likely, this is one of the mausoleums that they never open anymore. They know it's not in very good shape. These ones that go into the ground like that very seldom are in very good shape. So it probably just kind of rattled something by knocking. And as far as hearing weird sounds inside, you got to remember that, well, the street is just on the other side of this. So it's not like we're under laboratory conditions if we hear any sound. Another spooky one, a Candyman's grave. This is the Sanford plot. Mr. Sanford once owned the largest candy factory west of New York. It is guarded now by what appears to be 4 headless statues. Really, it's only 3 headless statues and one bent neck lady that just kind of looks headless. But I love that they're guarding a candy man. And exactly what happened to the heads, it might have been vandals in the 70s. It might have just been the neck is the weakest point on a statue. And as we've seen, they do tend to kind of wear out. Another one that I especially like. I wish I had a better story about this, but this is the Frederick Winston Seymour. This is just a corporate lawyer, but it's got these 4 friezes and sundials that mark the different seasons, including this really cool one with a raven perched on top of a skull. I guess that represents autumn. Each of them represents one of the seasons, but it's kind of hard to tell which one is which, honestly. But it's just so cool, a raven with a skull. Nevermore. But of course, the most famous of the spooky monuments at Graceland is the one commissioned by Henry Graves. It's usually said to be a monument to his father Dexter Graves, because his name is on top of the monument, on the plaque on the back. But really, by the time this was built, Dexter had been dead for like 75 years. It is a mausoleum to the Graves family. This is Henry Graves himself. I seem to have lost my picture here. Let me see if I can find that. I can fix this. I know I can. There we go. Now, Henry Graves came to Chicago with his father Dexter back when he still had to travel here by schooner, ended up becoming a wealthy racehorse breeder, and his probate file is quite a ride. I love this. Estate of Henry Graves, insane, crossed out, deceased. They didn't have the right kind of paperwork present in the office that day, I guess. But in it, he ended up putting aside about $250,000 for a family mausoleum, and specifically said that he wishes this to be the most imposing monument that the funds set aside will allow. So here's what he got, this statue by Laredo Taft, which was exhibited quite a bit when it was first built around 1907. And incidentally, the cost for this probably wouldn't have topped $25,000, $50,000 at the absolute outside. Which kind of leaves the question of what happened to the other $200,000 that was set aside. There was even a poem commissioned for this when it was first built by Herbert Spencer Fix. He was associated with Hull House, so was Louise de Covenbaugh, whose name is all over the paperwork. She's probably the one who commissioned this. It says here, "The rest is silence, Hamlet. Unmoved by thought of things beyond the grave, and silent 'neath the mysteries of night that seem to quench the last of human sight, he stands alone, unterrified and brave, not like a shaking coward or a slave, whom all the whips of horror's ceaseless smite, like a hero, but like a hero who has fought his fight, and dauntless waits some certain power to save, for in his soul hath sprung a strength unknown, from battling with the throes that throw mankind, compelling homage though he stood alone, and girt with fog-like fears that almost blind these mortal eyes, he feels, immortal grown, the silent reaches of the eternal mind." This was commissioned specifically to go with the statue, but is rarely associated with it anymore. There's quite a number of family members buried here, though there's only actual marked spaces on the lot record for Henry and his wife. Most likely, I would imagine by the time the rest of the people were moved from the Old City Cemetery to here in 1873, it's probably the case that there wasn't much left to move. They are probably underneath the monument itself. He's kind of tied for the most famous monument in the cemetery. We'll speed this one up a little bit, too. Of Inez. Usually said to be named Inez Briggs, though her name was Inez Clark. But probably just because she probably would have changed it to Clark after her mother got married, this being the 1800s. But passed away before she had a chance. There's a lot of urban legends about Inez. They say that she died being locked outside during a lightning storm, and now the statue disappears so her ghost can run around every time that there's a storm. And I have people who swear to me they've come here and seen an empty glass case during rainy days. But we now know that she did not die of an electrical storm. She died of diphtheria. We should really let her mother off the hook for that one. Her poor mother. This is her when we had the Into the Veil Atlas Obscura party. Here's her with a coyote walking by. I'm always trying to get the perfect shot of a coyote next to Inez. It still kind of eludes me, the perfect one. Well, I've never seen the statue disappear, but we have seen, when it gets kind of condensed and rainy, it does kind of fog up, and the chair ends up kind of looking like a skull to me. Now, this isn't what the statue looked like originally. We think that the glass was probably added around the 1930s or so. Before that, not only was there no glass, there was also a flower bed in front of it. I was going to show a tiny little thumbnail version there. There's a couple of doves sculpted on the end, and there's an epitaph that's illegible in the photograph. Believe me, I've tried enhance. Haven't quite gotten it down yet. We do know she died of diphtheria. Her mother kicked her father out when she was about a year old. At that time, she was only about 16 at the time that Inez was born. Shortly thereafter, she became pregnant again with a boy named Delbert, who has the smaller grave next to her. Delbert only lived a few months before dying of cholera infantum. And people like to leave trinkets here for Inez. Most recently, a hand. I don't know why. It's a hand. The garden was probably falling apart at one point. A lot of the copings and the curbings around the plots were falling apart. That's probably it. But there's not a lot in the documents that really tell us for sure. Move over to Rose Hill a bit for one of my favorite ones, the Devil Grave. This used to be white, but it was painted red during the pandemic. James Minakakis died June 6th, 2006, 6606. And up at the top, it says, "From darkness he came, in darkness he lived. To darkness he returned, and from darkness he will be reborn to a better time." This is how it looked before. Now here's the thing. James Minakakis did not die on 6606. In fact, last I checked, he's still alive and living a couple of blocks away from here. When I first saw this, I'm like, man, this must be the most metal guy on the planet. From what I understand, he's always declined through intermediaries to be interviewed about this. Not even really that big of a heavy metal fan, just a vampire enthusiast. I still hope to run into him one of these days. Another fairly spooky one for Mrs. H.O. Stone, Frances Pierce Stone. It's more sad than spooky. This is another one that is occasionally said to disappear. Frances was the wife of H.O. Stone, a mortgage broker, shown here with a really dressed for the part. When he was in his 40s, he went back to upstate New York and met teenage Frances and married her. She died of tuberculosis shortly after giving birth to their daughter, who then died a few months later herself. But here's an interesting thing, is this might be the second version of this. There are some newspaper articles from within H.O. Stone's lifetime saying that the first one that was carved sank on the ship that was bringing it over from the Atlantic. The urban legend was that it went down on the Lusitania, which is, they maybe are confusing it with Herbert Stewart Stone, a Chicagoan who died on the Lusitania. That's H.S. Stone, not H.O. Stone. But the Lusitania certainly would have been way, way too late for this, being in the 1910s. But it's entirely possible. The fact that we've got a couple of articles saying it went down on a ship. One of those things, I'd love to find a little bit more data just to confirm that. We'll move over briefly and check out this one statue for a banker at Bohemian National Cemetery. This is known as the Pilgrim. It's another one that sometimes they say don't look in its face, as they also do with Eternal Silence. The difference is Eternal Silence keeps its face covered. The Pilgrim does not. If you're in a spooky mood, it looks spooky. Otherwise, it can look determined. It can look sad. It can look stoic. If it spooks you too much, just imagine this particular pilgrim is the wife of Bath from the Canterbury Tales. You'll feel better. Before I wrap up, I thought I'd show just a bit of the slideshow of some of the Coyote shots. I posted these on Facebook initially, but they spread around a little too much, and they started getting worried. You know, the Coyotes don't like that much publicity. It gets, you know, it gets reposted on like CWB or something, and the comments are all, let's go shoot them. You know, CWB comments for you. But every week on the Patreon, I post one of them. So it's for paid subscribers, but it's on the lowest tier, just $3 a month. And you get pictures like this one of him looking up at the statue from Marshall Field by Daniel Chester French, just enjoying some art. This terrific one on a snowy day. This whole family hanging out. On the section that I call Pride Rock sometimes, they like to just kind of stand there like this. This is the one I ended up using in the Graceland book. There's the one from the beginning of the tour, on top of the underground crypts that go into section EF. So one in the background, you can see the Palmer Parthenon. And Waldo right there. We can find Waldo right behind the Coyote here. On a nice damp day. So when we've got Louis Sullivan's monument here and the Coyote running alongside the L train in the background. People tend to especially like it when I get one with the L train going in the back. So I'm always trying to get those. You got to really stand there because the train will go by every few minutes, and when it does, the Coyote looks in the wrong direction. And this is one of my very favorites. This foggy day when they all went running like they were off to go visit Dracula. Or something like that. But all right, ladies and gentlemen. That's the Surprise Sunday tour for today. Chicago's spookiest graves. Let me go ahead and plug some of the upcoming events. Tonight, there is still some space on Architecture of Mysterious Chicago. That'll be meeting downtown. Go to adamchicago.com for all the information and tickets. Thursday night, our next virtual tour will be True Crime Tales in Chicago cemeteries. Next in-person ones, the two Graceland ones on the 14th are sold out, so we have added another one on August 27th. August 21st is still kind of up in the air. We'll see what happens there. I haven't decided what to run that day. Friday, September 30th are the two Bose tours. I think there's a couple of spaces left on the 6:30, plenty still to go on the 8:30, so there's room for everybody. Everybody come on out. But all right, everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. We will put the Benny Goodman on and just hang out for a minute. Thanks, everybody.
And now Benny Goodman's arrangement of The Bugle Call Rang.
All right, now I'm going to go put the air conditioning back on. It is notably above room temperature here. Do I know anything about the Marshall Field Monument? A bit. It was built by Daniel Chester French, the same guy who did the Lincoln Memorial in D.C. It's officially known as Memory. Thanks, Shelley. Thanks, Don. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, David. Thanks, Adam. Gang connections to the Purple Gang. Most of them are kind of theoretical. There's a lot of talk about Capone having working with the Purple Gang or getting in fights with the Purple Gang, but it's very difficult to verify one way or the other. Thanks, Rodney. Yeah, Bob, hope you're doing well. Edward, thanks for joining the Patreon. Lenny, yeah, the cats, I think, are sleeping. They might as well. They wouldn't let me sleep at 5 o'clock. Alright, no angry messages today. Alright. Last week was almost like a flashback. When we were first starting live streams, I would get like messages from people who couldn't figure it out all the time. They're like, does this even happen, or are you just a scammer? I'm in a chat room with hundreds of people who can't get it to work. Sure. Thanks, Lorena.
And that would put rhythm in the feet of a wooden Indian. That was the bugle call rag, Benny Goodman's own arrangement. Now, the popular tune, Thanks a Million.
I don't need angry messages, I assure you. I enjoyed Deanna. Thanks to Ann. Go Cubs, Ann. Thanks, Timothy. Thanks, Martha. Jackie, I was thinking like a book or maybe a calendar with Coyote pics would be cool. I should do something with all of these. But they're on the Patreon, that's something. Morning, Julie. Those of you just joining us, keep in mind the tour was at 10 o'clock, so now we're just kind of in the post-tour hang. Thank you, Chuck.
Down Harlem Way, they're all trucking. And here's Helen Ward to tell you all about it.
I'm sure I can get a calendar put together on Cafe Press or something without too much trouble. Did it rain hard in Rogers Park? Not that I've noticed. Laura, yes, tonight is rain or shine. I will be there anyway. There's so many people on Patreon bringing other people that I just don't think I had the wherewithal to cancel it. I don't think I could get word to everybody. What I probably have to do is for a calendar, I'd probably have to Photoshop out the names, which isn't too hard. But you don't want specifically identifiable gravestones with it. That can lead to some tricks. I mean, most of my fans know where most of these pictures come from. Alright, I'll start working on the calendar this week, probably. I've got a few months, I guess. Carol, if it sells enough, there might be an afternoon one too that you could hit after the wedding, if you're in town. Alright, calendar sure seems popular. I'll see what the options are for printing something like that up. Without any overhead to me. Important.
Benny Goodman presents On the Alamo.
Laura Ronnie's gig went great yesterday. Stay spooky, Bob. I had a couple of ideas for things that I really ought to put up on the Cafe Press pretty soon. Speaking of, I should really plug cafepress.com/MysteriousRichicago has all of your Mysterious Chicago logo needs, and also just other cool stuff. Really want to do something with gruesome clues, spelled the old-fashioned way, like I break for gruesome clues. Keep honking. I'm driving slow to look for gruesome clues. Get off my ass or you'll end up your own gruesome clue. Have a good day, Adam. I am getting pretty hungry right now, I gotta say. Eunice, check Patty's Facebook page. But he's doing better. Let's see if they have short pajamas.
Benny Goodman and his orchestra, and hear Helen Ward sing Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo.
Chris, I do have Graceland bookmarks. I just often forget to bring them. But I got a whole box of those things. Thanks, Gene. All right, Benny is wrapping up, so I will also wrap up and get myself some get myself some lunch. So, a quick other plug for the upcoming things. Thursday night will be True Crime and Tales in Chicago Cemeteries. Tonight we've got Architecture of Mysterious Chicago downtown. A couple of sold-out Graceland tours next weekend, so I've added another one a couple of weeks down the road. Lots of cool stuff coming up here all the time. I'm going to work on some more Patreon stuff this afternoon if I've got time. So everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. Mural Monday might be slightly delayed. I will try to keep you all posted in the morning. So thanks a lot. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours saying to stay safe and stay strong. But most of all, everybody, make like these graves and stay spooky.